Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again. And today we're back with a different kind of Mercenaries video. This is something I've wanted to do for a little while now, and I've been trying to think about kind of the best way to go about doing this. But one of the most common questions I get asked is, whether you're just starting the game or if you're coming back to it after some time away. One of the most common things I see is, what's really the mercs or the team I want to focus on in order to get, the best experience, without having to grind up every single character along the way. So I thought I would do just kind of a little guide here on some good cores of mercenaries to focus on that can be both useful in PvE and PvP content. So that way, whether you're just getting started in the game or if you're someone who's coming back after not having played in a while, you have an idea of what would be good to focus on to get the best out of your, time invested into the game and the best use of your coins and whatnot that you have accumulated. So I have 4 different cores here that I'm going to go over. Basically, the concept of a core is just there's basically 3 main units that are good to make up a team. And these units are going to be relevant in both PvE and PvP content. So that way, you put in the time investment to get all these characters up. Not only is it a good team to deal with a lot of the solo content, but it is also, working your way towards a decently strong build to try out PvP with. So we're going to get right into it here. Before we do, though, if you enjoy this type of content, do remember to like and subscribe. It does a ton to help out the channel and keeps the Mercenaries videos coming. But let us dive right on into it here with our first core, the Nature core. So basically, Nature has been around since the start of the game, and particularly in PvP, the units you often see for the Nature core here are Malfurion, Brukan, and Cookie. These units are incredibly powerful and synergistic together. One of the main things that makes them so strong is being able to heal up off all your respective nature damage with Malfurion's Life Root Staff. Basically, with all these kind of cores here, I'm going to be telling you about 3 main units that I would definitely recommend focusing on. Usually, in most of the cores, there's only 1 legendary. Mercenaries is a little tricky for recommending exactly what people should do, because a lot of the time people are working with different collections, as people got different things from their initial pack openings or the packs that are provided for some of the in-game quests and all that stuff. So each one of these cores is going to have usually 1 legendary that is either important to the build or just makes it a whole lot stronger. So if you're looking for something to target, the legendaries in each of these are going to be very powerful and synergistic, and this will also be good so that, if you happen to already have one of these legendaries, that's what you want to focus on, or that's what you want to work on farming towards, if that's kind of the core you want to go for. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about what abilities you want to prioritize first in terms of leveling stuff up with your coins. So for Malfurion, definitely kind of the backbone of the nature build here. Like I said, his Life Root Staff is really what makes it so incredibly strong in both PvE and PvP. The amount of sustain this gives is absolutely crazy. And so when you're leveling Malfurion, if you're doing a PvE focus, I would probably suggest doing Cenarian Surge first, as the speed and decent damage there are rather solid. And then, honestly, I'd go with Life Root Staff as second, as it is just one of the main things that makes nature so strong. So you want to get that health up there. Afterwards, you can focus on the remaining 2 abilities here. Only really need to worry about his other items when you are maxing him out, as they don't really see a ton of play currently. Depending on what you're running into more in PvP or PvE, you may want to go for root first if you're worried about getting attacked in. However, I do think if you're doing a PvE focused, Archdruid's Call might be a bit better, as sometimes the big AoE health restore in one turn can be very, very relevant and helpful. Now, I do want to mention where exactly you can find Malfurion coins, as he is kind of the legendary of the nature core. So for Malf coins, you can find them in Felwood, the Fallen Guardians bounty, or in Blackrock Mountain with the High Lord Omok bounty. Moving on here, Brukan up next. Again, just absolute staple of the nature build. For Brukan, his main strength comes from the fact that you're scaling up with Lightning Bolt here, and you can deal an absolute ton of damage with Chain Lightning. The slow from Muddy Footing can be very good too, but it's not always quite as relevant as the other two. So in terms of focus, I think you definitely want to get that Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning up first. And then for his ability, if you're doing PvE, Crackling Band can be kind of decent. More damage on Lightning Bolt isn't bad. However, for PvP, Lightning Rod is by far the best equipment, and it's still good in PvE as well. So that's probably the equipment I would work on focusing first. In terms of where you can get Brukan coins, he is a rare, so you will accumulate them naturally faster through packs and, random bounty rewards, conceding a bounty, or just losing a bounty. Luckily, rares are a bit easier to come by, and as you can see by the crazy amount of Brukan coins I have. But if you want to farm up some Brukan coins specifically, you can go in the Baron's Apothecary Helbrim or Felwood Lord Banehollow. Worth noting, Lord Banehollow is currently one of the best Mysterious Stranger farming areas, so you should naturally build up a bunch of Brukan coins if you spend some time there farming tasks. And then we have Cookie here, kind of the last major unit for the nature core. Cookie is just so incredible, mainly because of this ability right here, Appetizers. This is an all-star in PvE and PvP. 9 health is a lot. It really gives some additional life to units that would otherwise die quite a bit faster. As mentioned before, he has all nature abilities, so he naturally has that great synergy with Malfurion and Brukan. In terms of what I would recommend focusing on Cookie, Fish Feast is probably his strongest direct damage attack, so I would work on getting that up first. And then Appetizers, because you can benefit from this even if you aren't running Cookie at all. Like on your main bench, you still get a benefit from it, which is very strong. After that, you can probably take your pick, depending on what your comp is trying to do. So if you're scaling up nature a lot, the bleed might be a bit better. However, if you're doing a bit more like AoE stuff, or you want to have Cookie on the bench with something like Diablo, Go Fish is probably the better choice. Cookie is like Malf and Brukan in that Appetizers is by far his best item, so that's really the only one you have to worry about until you start trying to max him out. And if you're looking to farm Cookie coins specifically, again, he is a rare, so he shouldn't be that hard to acquire and level up. But if you want to go for his coins, you can find them in Blackrock Mountain Rend Blackhand, or also in Blackrock Mountain Chromagus. Now, the next 3 here on the core, I wanted to give some alternate choices that are a little bit more budget, especially for folks who are focusing on the PvE content and aren't as worried about diving into PvP right away. So we do have 3 more units that synergize with the nature stuff. We have Guff here. Guff is, he doesn't see a ton of play in PvP currently. However, he definitely is very, very strong in nature for PvE content. Most of the time when I see people running nature for PvE, they're actually running Malfurion, Brukan, and Guff together. And then they have Cookie on the bench for additional health and kind of that backup nature support. So definitely recommend that if you want nature comp to be like your PvE core. Living Brambles is definitely his best ability for PvE. Just deals a lot of damage. It's what you're going to be spamming a lot. And then you want Bramble Thorn Totem to make it deal more damage. His other abilities aren't really that relevant, to be honest. These are really the main two I would focus on. And you can naturally get up his other two skills as you see fit. And I don't think his other equipment really see too much play. Then we have Yu'lon here. Yu'lon is another kind of budget inclusion. Really good rare. Can protect itself rather well. You can also buff up your nature damage. Much like with Brukan, you can scale it up with Enveloping Mists here. And he does have a nature attack, so that makes him definitely a rather solid choice if you need another red other than Malfurion for your nature comp. And he's useful in another core we'll be talking on a little later, the Dragon Core. So definitely not a bad budget inclusion. And then to round it out here, we do have Lady Anacondra. This is a character that hasn't really seen too much play in PvP, aside from some fringe builds with Chi-Ji. However, nature is currently lacking a really good green, so if you want a little bit more of a balanced in terms of typing PvE comp, Anacondra can be good for that, and she's also a rare, so she's easier to acquire as well. In terms of what you want to be focusing for Anacondra, it's probably her first two abilities, the dealing damage with Serpent Bite, and your Mend Beast as well for that additional healing is definitely nice. The Viper can be kind of okay in PvE as well, but it usually doesn't come up a ton. You're more so trying to lean on these powerful nature scaling synergies with the healing and the scaling from Malf and Brukan, so I'd focus these two. And then I think Toxic Venom is the equipment you want to go for, as you just want dealing a bit more damage. So that's the nature core. Really solid core of units here. The top three here are very much kind of a common solid backline in a fair amount of PvP comps. So if you already have some of these units, or if you kind of like the abilities of nature, this is one I would definitely recommend. Moving on here, we're going to go to probably my favorite of the bunch here, the Fire Core. So, you know, if you've played Mercenaries since launch, you probably know by now Fire is one of the best, if not the best, comp for PvE, especially with some of the new content we got more recently. Fire just absolutely destroys it. So the only thing about Fire is it is a little bit heavier on the rarity here. However, I would say in the long term it is really worth the grind for Fire, because it is just such a really, really good comp in PvE. And we are even seeing Fire kind of showing up in different spots in PvP more now, which is definitely cool to see. And units, especially like Belinda and Ragnaros here, are very prominent and powerful in a wide variety of comps, especially with Frost being such a large part of the PvP meta currently. So for Ragnaros here, basically for Rag, what I recommend is your PvE build would probably be more focused on getting Die Insect up for sure. This is one of Rag's most powerful abilities, and what I end up spamming a lot when I'm using him in PvE as well as PvP. Next, probably you want to do the equipment. So a lot of PvE players will level this fire damage. However, if you do want to focus on what's good for both PvE and PvP first, I would recommend doing Sulfuras, as that extra 20 health goes a long, long way. And that second part, your characters cannot be frozen, is incredibly powerful in PvP content. After that, I would probably focus on Meteor and Magma Blast, just getting those two up. And then once you have those abilities done, you could also get Blazing Rune if you do want that bit of extra fire damage for PvE. The nice thing about fire comp is that there are a lot of treasures that boost fire damage, so sometimes even if I'm not worried about things being frozen, the extra health is just really nice to have, as you can pick up that fire damage along the way. So that's pretty good. If If you want to farm for Ragnaros coins directly, the one bounty you can do that in is located in Winter Spring, and it is Avalanchan. Next up, we have Belinda. So this is going to be one of our ones with 2 legendary units. You don't need both of them to have success with a fire comp, but Belinda is just one of the most powerful mercenaries we've gotten in the drops so far this year, and she sees a variety of play in both fire and frost focused builds. She also gave fire comp something it was severely lacking in a very powerful green unit. So because of that, definitely highly recommend focusing on Belinda as well if you want to be using fire comp in the long term. In terms of her abilities here, what I would recommend focusing on is you definitely want to get your Flame Dart up, as you're going to be using her to combo your fire damage quite a bit. So you want to be getting as much damage as you can there. And then afterwards, you can kind of take your pick on Frost Dart or Frost Burn if you want more of that AoE scaling, or if you want an ability that can kind of provide more fire weakness. So things like your Baron Geddon AoEs deal more damage. In terms of her equipment, Lesser Water Elemental, by far the best equipment, both for PvE and PvP. I think this should be priority number 2 after you've gotten Flame Dart up. Definitely get the Water Elemental up because it's just incredibly powerful. Denying an action is absolutely insane. However, in PvE, the Fire Elemental definitely pulls a lot more weight sometimes. The Water Elemental is very good for the freeze, but sometimes that additional fire weakness can add up a lot over the course of a bounty or a boss fight. So you can kind of take your pick there, but if you want to maximize, what's best for both first, I do the Water Elemental to start off. And if you're looking for Belinda coins, you can find them in 3 different bounties, all Alterac Valley related. They're in Popsicooler, Directhar, and Belinda Stonehearth. I'd probably recommend doing Popsicooler out of all those ones, as in my opinion, it is probably the easiest of the Alterac Valley fights. Next up, we have Baron Geddon here, the last member of our kind of main 3 fire core. And Baron Geddon, mainly we're really using Baron Geddon for one ability here in fire comp, whether that's PvE or PvP, and that is Inferno. The amount of damage this can do is absolutely nuts, especially when combined with the equipment on him, the Mark of Conflagration, to make the fire combo deal even more damage. That's kind of the main use of Baron Geddon. Sometimes Living Bomb can be like fringe useful, but the main thing you're trying to do is use Geddon for a big, powerful blue AoE that also scales with your fire damage. So that is what I would recommend focusing on. Get this one all the way up there, get Mark of Conflagration done, and then you can worry about the other 2 skills afterwards. His other items don't really see a ton of play, so I would really just focus on getting those 2 up. If you want to farm for Baron Geddon coins in specific, you can find them in the Winter Spring bounty, the Yeti Hunter Ranal bounty. And so that is our main 3 for the fire core here. However, much like in the nature core, I did want to provide some alternate kind of other units that if you happen to have any of these other fire units, you can use them as a fill-in until you have the coins farmed up for some of the legendaries here that are very powerful in the build. So some substitutions we have. Chiji can kind of work in place of Belinda in quite a few ways. Belinda, I think, is obviously the best in terms of having a good green to balance out your comp, but a lot of people got Chiji for free through the past Chiji event, and now it is also available in packs, and it is only an epic, so a little bit easier to acquire there. For Chiji, the nice thing about it is it can be nice for kind of an AFK comp with doing some PvE with Ragnaros, Geddon, and Chiji, as you can basically spam the non-targeting abilities. So you can go Die Insect on Rag, you can go Inferno on Geddon, and you can use Inspiring Song to trigger your combo, and that way you don't have to even target anything, and it'll just blow through some of those lower level bounties. For Chi-Ji, by far the best abilities on him are definitely Skill 1 and Skill 3 here, and in terms of items, Blazing Band is probably the strongest by a quite large margin, so I definitely focus Blazing Song first, then probably Blazing Band, Firestorm, and then Inspiring Song, and then worry about the other 2 items afterwards. Another kind of budget replacement here can also be Antonidas. Antonidas is one I wouldn't really recommend going out of your way to level Antonidas, but if you already happen to have accumulated some coins for him and you don't have some of the other guys yet, you can kind of throw him in and he can work in PvE sometimes. Not really good in PvP, would not really recommend him at all there currently in the state of the meta, as he is just one of those launch mercenaries that really is more PvE oriented. In terms of what you want to focus for him, Fireball and Flame Strike definitely his 2 best abilities. Fireball Storm is pretty bad, I would do that one last, and I've been liking Cinder Core Staff just for that bit of extra fireball damage. You could also do Circlet of Flame if you wanted more damage on the AoE. Then the last unit here, we have Tavish. So Tavish was kind of the early on fire green option when fire really didn't have a lot of choices. Unfortunately, Tavish only has 1 fire ability and it is on cooldown. So it's kind of unfortunate there, as you can't combo on turn 1, and that's why I think Tavish has kind of fallen out of favor, especially as Belinda got introduced, who can spam fire abilities every turn, and just has better synergy overall with the fire comp. But again, this is kind of a budget include, just to, you know, if you happen to have Tavish, you can basically throw him in the beginning and he'll work fine in PvE. He has seen PvP play in the past, but he hasn't really been a big part of the meta for a little while now. In terms of what you want to focus, since this is for the Fire Core, you definitely want to get your Explosive Trap up, as this is a very powerful ability, and a lot of the times you're just going to be using it for comboing for your other units as well. Rigged Wiring is also by far like the best ability for Tavish. Passive plus 10 health, like with Rag, really, really big for that extra survivability, and your traps lasting until they're triggered is also incredibly powerful, so that way your opponent can't really play around not hitting Tavish that turn. Then I'd probably focus on Aimed Shot just for the decent damage, so you have a decent damage output on turn 1 while these are on cooldown. And last, I'd go for Bear Trap. The other 2 equipments here really don't see much play in either PvE or PvP, so I wouldn't worry about them too much. So that is the Fire Core. Again, this is like tied for our most expensive core, if not the most expensive core, just because it obviously uses, you know, we have 2 legendaries here for the in the main 3, and then an epic as well. However, even though the rarity on these ones is a bit higher, the power level in terms of especially PvE is just through the roof, and it's definitely been my favorite, so probably the one I would recommend the highest in terms of if you want just a very good PvE farming comp to work towards. And Fire Comp has been seeing more PvP play as well. With the addition of dragons, they've actually been doing pretty decent at countering a few of the new different builds that have been popping up, and I could see that continue to happen as the meta changes and maybe the archetype gets a bit more support in the future. So that is our Fire Core halfway through here. Next up will be Dragon Core. This is kind of a more recent addition, as we've gotten a lot of dragons in the last 2 drops. Some very, very powerful dragons, I might add, on top of that. For this one, our core is going to be focused around Yulon, Sinestra, and Longjin. We saw Yulon come up in the nature build, so if you are, already have some nature units, you can work him in there as well. But he also works very, very well with other dragons. Main reason for that being Pearl of Yulon here. Passive, your other dragons take 4 less damage. This is incredibly powerful in both PvE and PvP, and just gives you a level of survivability not many other comps in the game currently have right now. His other equipment that's also good here is Serpent Pendant, as scaling up an additional 3 nature damage with Enveloping Mists can be very, very powerful, especially when you have a lot of dragons in your comp, like we will for this one. Then, in terms of what you want to be focusing on for Yu'lon, I think you really want to get Jade Gust up. It's just a good amount of damage, especially if your opponent's going to be attacking. And then Pearl of Yu'lon second, probably, as that anti-dragon damage or damage prevention is just so powerful. Then these two are the ones you want to focus on afterwards. I would probably go for Enveloping Mist first, as sometimes the taunt can be useful and the nature damage scales up rather quickly. But Jade Flame Buffet is also good. This one is also especially good in PvP, as it can shut down Valera, speeding everything up, and plus 10 additional health across all your characters is quite a lot. In terms of where you can get Yu'lon coins, they are available in 2 bounties, Alterac Valley, Raw Timer, and the last bounty of Onyxia's Lair, which will be unlocked on April 5th, the Mida bounty. So if you're looking to farm up Yu'lon coins, you can get them there. However, like mentioned before, he is a rare, and it shouldn't be too bad to get up some coins from him, whether it be through packs or random coins through bounties or any of that kind of stuff. And if you want to craft him, it's only 100 coins, so it's a lot easier to acquire him. Next up is Sinestra. Sinestra has just been an absolute all-star when it comes to the just power in PvP. She has enabled more ties than I could really even think of at this point. She's just a very powerful unit, and that power also applies in PvE as well. The Dragon Cromp actually does shine quite a bit in PvE. And the main reason for that is because you can protect her rather easily with Yu'lon, and then between Mana Barrier, either healing herself or your other dragons, being really clutch, and just getting up that Twilight Extinction to AoE the board every other turn, it is just a very powerful combination of abilities. The other nice thing about Sinestra is that she is also a rare, so that is really good. Makes her easier to acquire, which is always a nice thing. In terms of abilities you want to focus on, I definitely recommend getting up Mana Barrier and Twilight Extinction first. These are just so incredibly powerful, and a lot of the times that's what we end up spamming back and forth. Mana Brooch is also a very important equipment, as it does allow us to restore a bit more health with our second skill, and the bigger thing, reduces damage taken by 5 this turn. That's really huge, especially if you're stacking that with the Yu'lon passive damage resistance. So in terms of keeping your dragons alive, in terms of both PvE and PvP, that's a great way to do it. And since this is a Dragon Core, Wrecking Swipe is actually pretty great too. But Sinestra's not really focused on being an attacker most of the time. It's just decent to level up to have a decent bleed on turn 1, but it's probably the one I would focus on last, as it is not the strongest of her abilities. If you do want to farm up Sinestra, you can find her coins in Alterac Valley, in the Ravak or Ibis bounties. And we have our legendary of the build here, Long Jin. Long Jin's a great character, one of my favorite mercenaries in PvP, and they're just incredibly powerful in both PvE and PvP content. The big thing with them is Among the Stars, being able to 1-speed swap is just absolutely nuts, especially in PvE, where a lot of the times it is very telegraphed what your computer opponent is going to do, who they're going to try and focus down. So you can just swap with Among the Stars and save a unit from death, and hopefully you can just kill them that turn as well. And it's definitely saved some of my units in PvE multiple times now. the nice thing about Longjin is all their abilities kind of synergize with each other. If you want to PvE focus, I do think you probably want Among the Stars and Celestial Breath up first. And then you can work on Starfire Blessing afterwards. PvE focus, I think these are all of almost equal importance, so definitely try and get them all to at least like level 3, as that is where you see like the most amount of gains, and after that it is a little bit smaller gains in terms of what you get for leveling up. For the equipment, it's very build dependent. A lot of times in PvP, if you're leading with Longjin, I really like the Kunlite Crystal, or if you're running into a lot of nature units in PvE, this can be good as well. Obviously, this is a Dragon Core, so Bottle of the Infinite Stars here is probably going to be the best item for PvE content, as that is a ton of additional health granted to your dragons, and the build really appreciates that survivability. And Band of Bursting Novas, this one is more of a PvP focus, in my opinion, but nonetheless, it still is very, very strong and can enable some rather powerful swap-ins in the late game. If you want to farm up Longjin coins, you have a few options. Alterac Valley with either Ikman or Vandar, as well as the new Onyxia's Lair bounty, SI7 Smuggler. Smuggler is probably the one I would recommend, as I believe it is easier to complete than the other two bounties. And so that's our, main 3 for the Nature Core, and they actually do a ton of work in both PvE and PvP builds. In terms of some of the other units that can be useful as substitutions, I do have a few here. Nefarian, one of our new dragons. Nefarian's really cool because, especially in PvE, he kind of has a very unique effect like Cookie with his chromatic dragonflight here, giving your dragons +6 attack. 6 is a lot of attack, and the nice thing about this is even though our main 3 dragons here aren't focused on physically attacking in PvE, a lot of units do end up physically attacking into you, so that residual damage really adds up rather quickly. And the same is also true in PvP to an extent, and Nefarian is definitely one of the better of the new dragons for PvP. So if you're looking for a more budget fill-in here, Nefarian is a good choice. In terms of what abilities I'd recommend focusing first, I think you definitely want to get that Draconoid Rush ability up to make the summon bigger. It's just very powerful, and a 12-12 is nothing to scoff at. So getting that up to that 12-12 stat line is pretty good. Next, I probably would recommend doing Chromatic Dragonflight, as this ability is just so good in PvE and PvP. However, Nefarian does have, multiple good items. I've actually seen all 3 of these items show up in different builds, kind of like Longjin in that way. So kind of depends what you want to do with your build. If you want more aggressive, kind of big damage, Chromatic Dragonflight's really good. If you want your token to kind of survive and deal more damage, Experimental Subjects can be decent. And if you're looking for more long-term sustain, Spare Parts isn't a bad choice. Next, I would probably work on Chromatic Infusion or Shadow Flame. This kind of depends on what you're looking to do. Shadow Flame is better if you want to have a way of getting more kind of AoE damage out there with your dragons, and Chromatic Infusion is better if you want to work on scaling a dragon all the way up to a bigger attack and having some additional healing available. Worth noting, those are both shadow abilities, so there can be some synergy there with other units like Vol'jin. But yeah, Nefarian's pretty decent, especially for a rare, so if you're looking for a budget include for the Dragon Core, he's a good choice. Another option we have here is Brightwing. Brightwing is kind of, decent unit, fairly interesting. The main thing I like about Brightwing is they do provide us some more healing. Again, this isn't a unit I would worry about going out of your way to farm. More so if you already have Brightwing or already have some Brightwing coins, you could throw it in as a substitution until you are able to get your 3 main dragons here. And Brightwing does provide you a lot of sustain and can have some synergy with the Yu'lon nature scaling, which can sometimes be pretty good. In terms of what you want to focus on Brightwing, their main abilities are the things I would worry about the most here. Fairy Breath just to deal some damage and scale up one of your bench units. Pixie Dust for that nice big healing effect. And then Pixie's Pouch just to give, a little more oomph to your healing abilities there. Phase Shift really doesn't come up a whole ton, so I'd probably worry about that one last. And that is what I'd recommend for Brightwing. And then our last kind of more budget substitution here is Onyxia. The only downside with Onyxia is she is a bit more fragile. Without max, she only has 65 HP, which really isn't a whole ton. However, between healing with things like Sinestra or Brightwing and Yu'lon's damage prevention, it can make her stick around longer. And she can deal quite a bit of damage. So what I'd recommend focusing on Onyxia is, I think you really want to be getting up Deep Breath and Cleanse the Nest first. This ability I don't think is quite as important because it's only scaling up the attack, I believe. It doesn't mess with the speed or anything else. And it's only really applying that extra attack if you're hitting into something with taunt. So while this ability is good, I think it can be kind of your last priority. I'd recommend doing probably Cleanse the Nest first, as well as Deep Breath to scale up the damage for that. In terms of her item, I think Broodmother's Rage is probably the best one to focus on, as you do have ways of summoning tokens, dragon tokens, that can really trigger this quite often between Nefarian and her own Death Blow on Cleanse the Nest. But yeah, that is what I'd recommend for Onyxia. Definitely a decent unit, especially I think she works pretty well in PvE, especially. So those are some more budget includes, but definitely the core you want to focus on is Yu'lon, Sinestra, Longjin, and you can kind of add the other ones in as necessary or substitute them while you're working on getting things like Longjin coins to either craft them or level them up more, as they're a bit less common than some of the other rare units like Yu'lon, Sinestra, Nefarian. So that's going to be it for the Dragon Core, and we will get into our last core here. If you're a PvP player or watched many of the PvP things I've done, Frost is absolutely dominant right now. So figured we would throw a Frost core in here too, as even though I wouldn't call Frost one of like the main PvE comps, it is so powerful in PvP, and so many of these units you play in so many different builds currently. I felt it was worth mentioning, if someone wanted to build towards a lot of those powerful and common PvP builds, Frost core is not a bad way to do it. There is some overlap here too, as we do have Belinda, like you can see, because she is both a fire and frost unit. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. If you already have her from fire, or you already want to work towards her for fire, then you already are, a quarter of the way to doing this whole Frost core. Localar is just absurd. This unit is absolutely crazy because of this passive right here, Frigid Winds. After an enemy acts, gain +4 frost damage until end of turn. That applies to your whole team, which is really crazy. In terms of what you want to be leveling with Localar, you do want to get his Hailstorm up, as that is one of his, if not his most powerful ability, especially when paired with Frigid Winds. So I'd say that Frigid Winds and Hailstorm are going to be your #1 priority on Localar. And then after that, I would worry about either Frost Shock or Snowball. Both of these are good and strong in both PvE and PvP, but you can kind of take your pick. Frost Shock if you want more options to have on turn 1, and Snowball if you are going for the Frost core and have a lot of that overarching Frost synergy that will scale up the damage on this to be very large very quickly. Now, in terms of farming Localar, you can get Localar coins in Alterac Valley, either the Localar Bounty or the Vandar Bounty. But again, he is a rare, so you should build up his coins faster than a lot of the legendaries or epics. And we have Varden, kind of one of the more complained about units right now in PvP because of the speed manipulation and being able to lock people out with Cold Snap on turn 2. Varden's just incredibly strong. Also, you know, some nice slowdown, scales off the local R. Just a really crazy powerful unit. Has a very strong death rattle too, where, you know, you kind of punish the opponent for killing your Varden by freezing one of their units until the next turn. In terms of what you want to prioritize on Varden, I would say that you want to get your Flurry and Cold Snap done. Those are the biggest and most powerful abilities, so you want to get those leveled up. And then in terms of PvP, I think Chilling Amulet is probably the best ability. However, Band of Frost also does see quite a bit of play in a few different builds that focus on scaling up the frost damage. So depending on the build you want to go for, you can kind of determine your choice there. But I do think Chilling Amulet is overall the best one. And Potion of Ice can actually be kind of okay for PvE as well, but it doesn't really see any play in PvP. So do with that information what you will, depending on how you want to focus getting this build together. But yeah, that is what I recommend for Varden. Ice Lance is good too, but I would worry about that after getting Flurry, Cold Snap, and one of these two equipments up first. And then our main legendary of the bunch here is going to be Jaina. Jaina is really, really strong because of Ice Block. Ice Block is just super duper insane. I mean, we all know how insane Ice Block was in, you know, regular Hearthstone back in the day, and it is just as powerful, if not more so, in Mercenaries. Being able to prevent the damage, become immune when you take that lethal damage is very huge. And she's also just great for scaling up your frost damage. In terms of what you want to prioritize on Jaina, Ice Float's definitely the most important ability, and then Ice Block Talisman. Those are the two things that make her super duper strong, so that's what you want to focus on. And then next, you probably want to do Water Elemental, as Water Elemental can be rather useful sometimes. And then last, probably Icicle, as this one doesn't see a whole ton of play usually, unless you really just need that little bit of extra damage that it has over Ice Floats, but most of the time you'd rather be scaling up your frost damage. In terms of her other equipments, neither of these really see play, so I'd worry about getting Ice Floats, Ice Block, and then the other two abilities as kind of your primary focus. If you want to farm up some Jaina coins, you can do so in Blackrock Mountain with Gar or Alterac Valley with Ravak. And then the last unit of our Frost Core here, the only green Frost unit we have available so far, is Belinda. Belinda's just such an insane unit. The fact that she works so well in both Fire and Frost is a great reason to focus on her. She's just super duper crazy. I won't really talk too much about her here, as we have already kind of gone over what I recommend for Belinda. But, you know, for the Frost build, you might want to focus on Frost Dart first. However, Flame Dart is still also really good and powerful because you are also applying that Frost weakness, and Frost relies less on comboing and stuff as opposed to Fire. So you don't really have to worry about the fact that you're not doing a Frost ability all the time. Frostburn is still really, really good just because of that scaling and nice AoE. And again, the Lesser Water Elemental is probably the better choice, especially for a Frost-focused core here. Again, if you want to farm up Belinda coins, you can do so in Alterac Valley at Popsy Cooler, Drekthar, or Belinda Bounty herself. Again, Popsy Cooler is probably the easiest one that I would recommend for that. So those are our 4 cores here. You know, I really wanted to provide a resource that I felt was useful for people mainly focused at starting out in the game and not really being sure what units are good or what do I want to focus on. So hopefully this gave a nice little variety in terms of different things you could focus on working towards. And it's also useful that all of these characters, for the most part, do both see use in both PvP and PvE. So that way, no matter what you want to focus on, or if you want to focus on one to start and then try one out later, none of these units should be, useless or not great, at least, in the context of the current meta. And I think, just very solid building blocks to start out your kind of Mercenaries foundation on. So if you have any questions about any kind of this stuff, feel free to leave them in the comments below. But that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, do remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.